We live in an instrument. We live in an instrument. Our physical form is an instrument. We've extended our instrument physically. This cable that comes out of the tail end of my guitar is like a consonant. It directs the sound. This cable directs the sound into a premixer. Then another consonant comes out of the premixer to direct the sound into the mixer, mixer, and it has all kinds of things and consonants that go into the amplifier that goes to the speakers. Consonant is like that. It directs the sound. When we chant Om Namo Gurudev Namo, we're not chanting words that mean something, although we've added meaning to them just to satisfy the intellect. Because if you don't satisfy the intellect will drive you crazy. The intellect will say, what does it mean? Why are you doing that? I don't know if I believe in that. I don't think I believe in that. And you actually think that that's you? That's not you. That's the intellect having a response to a stimulus. Period. When the ball bounces off the wall, the angle of the bounce, is it the wall or the ball? Neither. It's the angle of trajectory. The angle of trajectory toward the wall determines the angle of reflection off the wall. The angle of trajectory into your intellect determines the angle of reflection out of your intellect. Reflection, response, reaction, whatever you want to call it. And you actually believe your thoughts. That's a fool's game. Your task is to interfere with the angles so that the angle of the response coming off the wall of the moment is of your choosing. But if it's not of your choosing, what you try to do is you try to create meaning. What's the meaning of the angle? The meaning of the angle is that it's equal to the angle. The angle of trajectory equals the angle of reflectory. Period. For every action, there is a reaction that is equal. One of the mantras that Guru Nanak gave us, putting together some ancient mantras, is the mantra that you just chanted at the end of that. Ad Gare Name, Jagad Gare Name, Sat Gare Name, Siddhi Gurudev Name. In intellectual language, it's called bowing to the four corners. It's interesting because the only thing that bowing does is equalize the blood in your brain and your heart so that your brain stops thinking it's more important. The only purpose of a bow is to get your heart into the picture. Because the brain will dominate a picture every day, every moment of every day. So bowing in the four directions. The four directions is just an intellectual metaphor. What it means clearly are the four realities of life, the four fundamental realities of life, which are ease, joy, knowing, and liberation. Ease is physical, the opposite of which is disease. Joy is emotional, the opposite of which is every other emotion. Knowing is mental, psychological, the opposite of which is all forms of ignorance. And liberation is spiritual, the opposite of which is any form of slavery. You know, I always say that slavery still exists. You just get paid because of inflation. You do not get paid what you're worth. You do not get paid basically at all. Back in the days of slavery, wherever it was all over the world, slavery has existed. At least you got room and board and medical care. Here, with inflation, you get nothing. You don't get room, you got to pay for it with nothing. You don't get board, you got to pay for it with nothing. And you don't get medical care, you got to pay for it with nothing. I mean, think of the amount of money that you give away life for. If somebody walked up to you on the street and said, here's a bag or a briefcase, and in it is $1 trillion. Will you die on this spot if I give this to you? What would your answer be?
No.
So that means that the low blue book on your life is $1 trillion. I mean, that's like below wholesale. You would not give it up for that. Right? If you do some easy math, in other words, you say, okay, I lived for 100 years, and you do the math as to what that $1 trillion for 100 years of life is worth, it actually boils down to around $1,000 a breath. You take about 15 breaths a minute on average. So $15,000 a minute times 60 minutes in an hour is $90,000 an hour times 8 hours in a day. Anybody making that in this room? And yet you say you won't give away your life for $1 trillion, and yet you give your life away in pieces. For peanuts, and I apologize to the peanut for using it as a metaphor. Think about it. If what you're doing with your life is not the passion of your life, then you're sacrificing your life for someone else's dream. Whoever or whatever it is that you're working for to get enough money to get by on is slavery. And why do you do it? Because you're afraid if you don't do it, you won't survive. And the funny thing is that you're not surviving anyway. You're dying every moment. And when you don't do what is your passion, you die more rapidly. Now, it's been hundreds of years since somebody talked to you like that. I'm not saying that I'm special. I'm just saying that, most people don't talk like this. I fortunately had a great teacher who had a great teacher who had a great teacher who had a great teacher, and the story continues. But the 4 directions or qualities of life, called qualities of life's force. Life's force is called, in Chinese, it's called qi. Acupuncturist, we have one of the greatest in the world sitting in the back of the room, sitting next to a prayer worker who does the energy with the needles. The energy that those needles work, they work like an antenna on your car, and the energy is like the radio signal that finds the antenna on your car. It's called prana or chi. In English, it's called the force of life, or life itself. The 4 qualities of the force of life. Agare name, ease, physical ease. Jugad gure name, emotional joy. Satgare Name. Intellectual, intelligence, psychological, mental, whatever word you want to use, knowing. You know everything. Figure out how to recall it. You know everything that was, is, and will be. Figure out how to recall it. And you can't figure it out with your brain. You have to figure it out with your being. Siddhi Gurudeve Name. Spiritual liberation. So, musicians, you come into the posture like this. Elbows are against your sides. Can you turn down the back lights a little bit? Anyway, thanks, that's good. So your elbows are by your sides. You can actually take those and put them on the floor, not standing like that. So we're like this. Satgare Name, Sri Guru Deve Name, Satgare Name, Jagadgare Name, Satgare Name. Can you take my voice down a little bit, please? Sri Guru